Welcome to Pylos, traveler. This area, along with the nearby island of Sphacteria, were important battlegrounds during the Peloponnesian War. I always find it a shame that such lovely-looking places were exposed to so much violence. It's difficult to take pleasure in relaxing on the sand, knowing how stained it is with blood. The Peloponnesian War was a great conflict between rivals Sparta and Athens. It lasted many years and cost a great number of lives on both sides. The battles of Pylos and Sphacteria occurred almost one after the other, and culminated with one of the most surprising outcomes in the entire war. But I will not spoil it for you. You'll have to experience it on your own. I'll wait for you at the end of the tour.
Since 431 BCE, the Peloponnesian War had been raging between Athens, Sparta, and their allies, with neither side gaining much ground. But in 425 BCE, an Athenian general named Demosthenes changed that. After a storm forced his fleet to stop in Pylos, Demosthenes realized a military presence in the area would give them an advantage against Sparta. Unfortunately, the fleet strategists did not believe him, and left Demosthenes in Pylos with 5 triremes and 1,000 men. The Spartans, meanwhile, were too busy celebrating a religious festival to notice the enemy on their doorstep. Once Sparta discovered the Athenian presence on Pylos, the Spartan king Agis mustered his troops and fleet. Sparta then descended on Demosthenes' outpost, attacking from both the sea and the mainland. The Athenian general had to mount a hasty defense. He pulled his boats back to the foot of the ramparts and fixed them in place with stakes, providing extra cover. Then, going against all the established rules of battle, he descended with his hoplites to fight on the rocky shore, where he believed the Spartans would disembark. His gamble paid off, and the Spartans did indeed attempt to land at this location, though Demosthenes' forces made them hesitate. One of the Spartan leaders, Brasidas, decided to make the first move by ramming the rocks with his boat, exclaiming, "It's only a few planks." He paid for his actions when his shield slipped into the sea after descending from his boat, leaving him open to many blows. The battle raged on into the night and continued to the next day, remaining locked in a stalemate. However, on the evening of the second day, Athenian reinforcements arrived. The sudden arrival of the Athenian fleet stacked the odds in Athens' favor. The fleet decided to hold off their attack until the next day, when they swarmed the Spartan ships. They successfully captured 5 enemy ships and damaged many others, cutting off access to the nearby island of Sphacteria. Then, to add insult to injury, the Athenians raised a stake hung with weapons they'd captured from the Spartans, including the shield of Brasidas. Meanwhile, The 420 Spartans on Sphacteria were trapped, and Sparta was completely helpless to rescue them. With 420 of their men trapped on Sphacteria, Sparta needed to reevaluate their position. The Spartans on the island were essentially the Athenians' hostages, and Sparta could not move to rescue or resupply them without putting their lives in danger. In an effort to save the trapped soldiers, the Spartan leadership negotiated an immediate truce with the Athenian strategists. Sparta agreed to hold back its fleet and halt their attacks on Pylos, and in return, the Athenians permitted them to send supplies to their men. In the meantime, Sparta sent ambassadors to Athens to try and negotiate a better deal. The hasty truce greatly humiliated Sparta, as they were forced to recognize just how helpless their infantry was in the face of an Athenian fleet. To bargain for the safety of their men, Sparta sent ambassadors to Athens to propose a cessation of hostilities. The ambassadors tried to emphasize that their situation was not a result of strategic incompetence or lack of strength, but rather plain bad luck. According to them, the Spartans on Sphacteria did not deserve to suffer further, because they were trapped through no fault of their own. These statements provoked the ire of Cleon, a popular Athenian politician known for his populist speeches. Cleon insisted that the terms of negotiations be discussed openly before the assembly and the Athenian people, instead of in private. The Spartan ambassadors were not as comfortable with public speaking as the Athenians, so they decided to leave. Following the failed attempts of the Spartan ambassadors, hostilities resumed. Back in Athens, Cleon took matters into his own hands. After being elected general, or strategos, he left to join the ongoing battle, accompanied by javelin-armed infantry and archers. With renewed strength and numbers, the Athenians landed on Sphacteria and engaged their enemy. The battle was hard fought, but they eventually managed to surround the remaining Spartans. It was then that Cleon invited the Spartans to surrender, as he hoped to return to Athens with prisoners. The Spartans were exhausted after spending 72 days on the island, so they accepted Cleon's offer and laid down their arms. A Spartan capitulation had previously been unheard of, and the news of their surrender echoed throughout Greece like thunder. The Spartans' capitulation completely changed the course of the Peloponnesian War. Athens used their new prisoners of war as leverage and threatened to execute them if Sparta ever returned to pillage their lands. This gave the Athenians the freedom to conduct their own raids, which were aided further by their eventual seizing of the island of Kythera. Sparta tried to negotiate for peace, but were unsuccessful. Cleon, meanwhile, was emboldened by his victory and continued to gain popularity with the Athenian people, popularity that translated to power.
I hope you enjoyed learning about the battles of Pylos and Sphacteria. The battles were hard fought by both sides, but Athens' victory gave them an enormous boost in morale. It encouraged them to be more aggressive, and it was some time before Sparta recovered from the aftershocks of their historic surrender. Now, is there anything else you'd like to do? I'm happy to oblige. Let's begin. Where were Demosthenes and his fleet forced to land during a storm? Demosthenes landed close to the island, but not directly on it. Try again. Yes, Demosthenes landed at Pylos, where he was inspired to set up an outpost. On to the second question. Which famous Athenian argued with the peace-seeking Spartan ambassadors? Pericles died a few years before the battles of Pylos and Sphacteria. Try again. Socrates was a philosopher, not a career politician. Although, he probably would have told you there's little difference between the two. Correct. Cleon demanded the terms of the peace be discussed in front of the Athenian assembly, which greatly dissuaded the ambassadors. One last question. Which Spartan general rammed Pylos with his ship? Leonidas was a Spartan king who died 55 years before the Battle of Pylos. Try again. Agis was the Spartan king who gathered his forces after hearing of the Athenian presence on Pylos. Try another answer. Thucydides was an Athenian historian and general. Keep trying. Correct. Brasidas ordered his ship to ram the rocks and lost his shield in the process. You've passed the test. Well done, traveler. Then I will say farewell. Though I hope our paths will cross again someday.
Στα άπαντα προσφέροντας άπαντα. Λέξωση την ενή επιθυμία και ως αύριον εγγυήσει ότι
Welcome to Laconia, visitor. You're here to learn about Spartan society, yes? Then I won't stop you. Sparta is a glorious place, and you should feel honored to be here. Honored, and perhaps somewhat frightened. Sparta had a unique hierarchy, especially compared to the rest of Greece. Everyone had their place, and you will soon learn what those places were. I will find you again once your visit has ended. Until then, visitor.
Spartan society was structured around austerity, self-sufficiency, and a hostility towards foreign elements. It was divided into three social classes: citizens, perioikoi, and helots. Citizens were called Spartans, or homoioi. They were free men and women with mostly equal rights and wealth, though their contributions to political life were extremely limited. The perioikoi lived in surrounding areas under Spartan control. They cultivated the land and were primarily merchants and craftsmen. They were also part of the army, and their lands were the first line of defense in the event of a hostile attack. Helots were Sparta's lowest class. They were people who had lost their freedom to the Spartans, and they served the city as slaves. Helots were considered property instead of people. As a result, they had no political or civil rights. Helots made up the majority of Sparta's population. According to Polydeuces, they lingered between slavery and freedom. Two elements made Helots differ from other slaves. They were allowed to form their own families, and they were publicly owned by the city of Sparta instead of private citizens. Because Helots were deemed public property, they could not be sold as merchandise. They mostly worked to cultivate the land, but also fought in wars alongside the Spartans. While they gave the fruits of their labor to Sparta, they also kept a fair part of it for themselves. This practice allowed some Helots to make enough money to buy their own freedom. Alternatively, if a Helot served the state well enough in military campaigns, they could also be granted civil rights. The founding of Sparta is dated around the 9th century BCE. Historical information about the city is limited, but it was known to extend into the region of Laconia. Over time, Sparta started encroaching on the territory of Messenia, eventually leading to war. Sparta gained more land in this conflict, which they divided between their citizens and the perioikoi. The aftermath of the Second Messenian War, from 640 to 620 BCE, then divided the population into three groups: the homoioi, the perioikoi, and the helots. The helots of Laconia mostly respected Sparta's rule and did not cause much trouble. However, helots from Messenia supposedly resisted the Spartans, although sources can only confirm one revolt for certain, which occurred in Messenia in 464 BCE. During the 5th century BCE, helots were quite active in the army, especially during the Peloponnesian War. They served as hoplites on land and as rowers during naval battles. In both cases, they gave Sparta an important numerical advantage. For every Spartan on the battlefield, there were at least 7 helots. Although many ancient sources say Spartans had a hostile relationship with helots, they were much more likely to treat them better in times of war. For example, when 300 helots and 120 elite Spartans were captured by Athens during the Battle of Sphacteria in 425 BCE, the Spartans promised the helots their freedom if they served them well in combat. Similarly, around the same time, the Spartan general Brasidas fought a battle alongside 700 helots. Impressed by their courage and loyalty, Brasidas later freed them all and allowed them to join the Perioikoi. Perioikoi were another group of Sparta's population. They lived not in the city itself, but in its surrounding areas. The Perioikoi were never hostile against the Spartans. In fact, both groups together were known by the collective name Lacedaemonians. Perioikic cities had their own autonomy and sanctuaries, but they were always bound to Sparta. They were allowed to develop their own local laws and economies, but could never reach a level of prosperity that rivaled their parent state.
I see you've finished. I hope you have a better appreciation for Spartan society. Nothing we do is without a reason, and every man, woman, and child has a role to play. What would you like to do? Is that so? Then let us begin. During which battle were Helots promised their freedom? It was Athens who fought the Persians at Marathon, not Sparta. Try again. Yes, in the Battle of Sphacteria, a group of elite Spartans promised to free their accompanying Helots if they helped the Spartans during a siege. Next question. Which of the following is another name for Spartan citizens? The Periki were people living in Sparta's surrounding areas. Try again. No, Helots were slaves. Keep trying. Spartan citizens were also called Omni, which meant equals. One final question. Which Spartan general freed 700 Helots? True, Pausanias was a Spartan general, but there is no record of him freeing 700 Helots. Try another answer. Correct. Brasidas freed 700 Helots as a reward for their exemplary military service. You passed. I'm impressed. Then you may leave. Farewell, visitor.
Εις περολίγοι την εσκάπηλοι έχουν συνάδειαν, αλλά όμως ήλθες εις των τέλειων τόπων. Ναι, η ήλιελά της τίχρεται προς κόπας αξιολόγων νέων ένθα.
Φύγε φόρο, προείρηκα το πατρί σου ότι έδι πάβει να του στείλω. Αστείο ερωμανής. Γαληνία τούτο. Είπε αυτό που είναι τούτο η ώρα. Μη ακούσετε αντιλήψη.
Μεγαλώνει.
Απλώς προσαπόμενε. Και νυν
Μεγαλώνει. υπερπαρόδοτα των θεών της Δίωσε και η τριακάδα αγελάδων, άστην ασύλληπτε παρεμβούλες του αιώνα.
Αχ, η ρίστο εμπαρόδο, τα των χρεών της χείρας. Κι δάνειος υπάρχει το κονέ, εις αρχής των χρεών.
Μεγαλώνει, απολυώνουμε. Φωνία και τριοκτώνε.
Όχι έχει θα άλλο ρόλος. Κατανοώ ότι θέλεις να συναντήσεις.
Οι ούπες γεννήσετε, τέλος γάμου.
Ξένος, τι ήστα όταν νύχει στην ήλιο.
Κατανοώ ότι θέλεις να συναντήσετε.
Κληρονόμησε νοικία και δούλους παραδείγματος.
Α, κυρίστε παρόδο.
Ο εγώς
Η ρίστο
όπως λέει,
υπερπαρόδοτα
πως βήματα δυνάμει. Δέσποινα και κύριε πολίτε,
Οι άλλοι έχουν σταματήσει.
ότι ούν επιθυμείτε ο άντρας και γυναίκες δύναμε φέρ.
Σε αυτή δώσαμε. Παρόδοτα των χρεών της χείρας.
Δέσποινε και κύριε πολίτε, έχομεν χιτώνας μοίρα, την άγκος βήματα εξεκρού.
Αληθές εστί.
Κατανοώ ότι θέλεις να συναντήσεις με
Ναι, όμως γάμος, εστί επιχείρηση της.
που εσάν ότι η θυγάτερ μου εκληρονόμησε νοικίαν και δούλους παρά δύο αυτής.
Η ρίστο εν παρόδοτα των χρεών της χείρας.
Έχομεν κατά μονοπόλιο λίγου.
Greetings, visitor. You stand in Sparta's political center, where all of the city's most important decisions were made. You should feel honored. Sparta's political system was unique in the Greek world. While Athenians wasted hours on end whining and wagging their tongues at each other, Spartan kings made their decisions swiftly and deliberately. They preferred action over words. Come find me again when you finish your visit. We will speak more then. Farewell.
Sparta's political system differed from most of Greece's. One of its most distinctive features was that it was ruled by two kings. These kings belonged to two separate dynasties, the Eurypontids and the Aegeads, both of which were said to be descended from Heracles. Both kings shared equal powers, and disputes between them required the intervention of special magistrates known as ephors. However, if one of the kings were more charismatic or experienced, they could influence the weaker king's choices. Spartan kings had several responsibilities and functions. As lifetime magistrates, they were technically Sparta's priests and strategists, and their duties encompassed everything from politics to justice. Originally, both kings would lead military campaigns in times of war. However, from 507 BCE onwards, only one of the two kings could be head of the army. On the battlefield, kings were accompanied by 300 elite soldiers for protection. But being a king wasn't only about working and fighting. They enjoyed special privileges as well. Spartan kings lived at the expense of the city, owned royal estates in the surrounding Perioikic cities, and received the majority of the spoils of war. When they passed away, they were buried with special honors, and the population mourned them for a period of 10 days.
Λύσμονες και ασυριβίωνες. Πού είδαν οι όσοι
Ομοσίο επαΐω.
Τε ευθυτομή.
The kings of Sparta enjoyed many important religious honors. They were in charge of sacrifices, both during military campaigns and at home. The kings received double portions of the meat at all communal meals, and they were also the first to pour libations. They also personally conducted public sacrifices as priests, which helped remind their subjects of their divine connection to Heracles and Zeus.
Τραγωδία ανέρευτη. Εστιμιασμός μικιόμενος να κλονίσει την ισορροπία του πνεύματος. Σας γυναίκας
The ephors, or overseers, were 5 magistrates elected by the Spartan assembly. They were chosen from amongst Spartan citizens over 30 and served for 1 year with no possibility of re-election. The ephors played a large part in administrating the city and were considered the most democratic agents in the Spartan political system. They had judicial power and ordered the dispatching of the Spartan army during wars. They also met and negotiated with representatives from other states, in addition to running the agoge, the Spartan education system. While not as powerful as the 2 kings, the ephors still held great sway over Sparta's affairs.
καταδικαστέημη ηθική αξία το τραγωδοποιώ. Τραγωδοποιώ σε στη κλέφτη, όπως και τον αποκριτών κλέφτη την χάρη του έτου.
The Gerousia was the Spartan Council of Elders. It was made up of the 2 current kings, as well as 28 elders called Gerontes. They were Spartan citizens over the age of 60, the cutoff age for military duty. They were elected for life by the Spartan assembly. The Gerousia, similar to Athens' Boulé, handled legislative and financial matters. It could submit bills and motions to the assembly, and could also cancel assembly decisions with the power of veto. To ensure that the right of veto did not weaken the assembly, ephors were introduced to keep the Gerousia in check and maintain a steady balance of power. This allowed Sparta to include more just elements in its political system. The Spartan assembly, or the Apella, was made up of Spartan citizens who were over 30 years old. Its exact meeting place remains unknown, but it was presided over by a special member of the ephors called the eponymous ephor. The Apella had limited authority, since any decision it made could be overruled by the Gerousia. But thanks to the efforts of the ephors, it still played an important role in Spartan society. The Apella dealt with topics like foreign affairs, war declarations, peace negotiations, and more. They also elected ephors and Gerousia members, and could both grant political rights to foreigners and remove them from Spartan citizens. Unlike the myriad sources on the functions of the Athenian assembly, the exact details of the Apella's decision-making process are unknown.
I see you finished. I hope you feel more knowledgeable about the inner workings of Spartan politics. Our way of ruling was not conventional, to say the least, but it served our purposes well. What would you like to do? Are you? We shall see. Let's begin. What was the name of the Spartan assembly? Correct. The Spartan assembly was known as the Apella. Question 2. How many members did the Yerosia have? There were 28 Yeronters on the Council of Elders, but they weren't the only members of the Yerosia. Keep trying. Yes, the Yerosia consisted of 28 Yerondas and the 2 kings of Sparta. Last question. What was the name of the Spartan education program? The Agora was the central meeting place of many Greek cities. Keep trying. Correct. Our rigorous education program was called the Agogi, and it was overseen by the Air Force. You've done well, Visitor. Very well. Farewell, Visitor. May your travels be safe and carefree.
Οι άλλες 12 αφιχθεάν και θήκας. Αγνοούμενοι τούτο εγένετο ασθενείας Σένεκα και οι άλλοι στινάς αιτίας. Προσήπε κι άλλοι.
Αγνοούμενοι έχει την αυτήν αίρεση. Ή σπιρτικό.
Μία μίλια.
Ήκουεσαν ότι οι
Δεν είναι ξάδερφοι, βλέπω, στο Εσύγους.
Φύγε, μωρό.
Μάλλον το έμαθω λέγω φεύγει. Μάλλον αυτό δύστημα λέγω.
Τηρίστο εν παρόδο τα τον
Τηρίστο εν παρόδο τα των Θεών. Λέγω εμαυτό ευρέκα.
Όταν γεννήθης, εγκαταλείπεις να ρωτήσεις. Γεννήθης εις Σπάτη και χειρόχωτο να την έχεις. Πατήρ σου τι μάχη να προτείνεις να δείξεις τον πυρό σου. Πατήρ σου καρδομεκτήσει.
Απολαμβάνω ότι ούκ αποδημώνται.
Ήριστο εν παρόδο τα των Θεών και
Δημήτρη βοηθός. Δημήτρη βοηθός.
Τα δικαστέιμη ελληνική αξία του τραγωδοποιό. Τραγωδοποιός έστι κλέπτης.
Η ενή εξαρτάται.
Ήκουεσαν ότι φυγάτε.
Welcome, visitor, to where Spartan boys become Spartan men. I can't help but be reminded of the boy I used to be. I wonder what that boy would think if he saw me today. Would he be proud, intimidated, or would he pity the tired old man standing in front of him? But such thoughts are meaningless. Let us move on. The Agogi was Sparta's strict education system. The strenuous regimen took in the young boys and then reshaped them until nothing was left but the strength, intelligence, and resolve of a perfect Spartan citizen. I will find you once your visit has ended, and we will talk further. Until then, visitor.
Ο Γεουκέ στην υγεία κατάσταση λογικού νου. Ο λογικός νους
Sparta was a Greek city located in the Peloponnese. It differed from other cities of the time in that it had no walls. Sparta originated as 4 neighboring villages: Patane, Limnes, Mizoa, and Cynosura, all of which shared the same political, military, and religious life. After 2 wars with the Messenians, the city's territory expanded even further. By the 5th century BCE, they allegedly controlled almost half of the Peloponnese. The Agoge was the military training and education program undergone by Sparta's male youth. Grooming men for war was one of the city's main priorities. Boys began their training at the young age of 7 and completed it when they were 30. It has been said that Spartan infants were inspected for weakness shortly after birth. If they were deemed too sickly, they were thrown into chasms. However, this information remains unproven. The healthy boys were considered suitable for training. When they came of age, they were removed from their families and were placed into service of the state. Their education included subjects like reading, writing, and even music, but was mostly focused on tough military exercises meant to turn the boys into efficient soldiers. The Agoge was divided into 3 cycles: one for boys aged 7 to 12, one for adolescents aged 12 to 20, and one for men aged 20 to 30. Each cycle included different exercises for refining the body and mind. Sparta played a large role in defeating the Persians during the Greco-Persian Wars in the 5th century BCE. They held their king Leonidas' glorious death at the Battle of Thermopylae in particularly high esteem. Because Leonidas was killed in battle, Sparta believed he died a good death and showed incredible bravery, qualities to be held as a model for all Spartans. This idealized bravery was embedded in the city's collective memory and was the main quality people strove for in the Agoge.
Παπέ, το ημοχειρίδιο εξέπνευσε.
Πότε γεννήθης, εγκαταλείφθης παραλοφής.
The first cycle of the Agoge focused on boys aged 7 to 12. Each of the boys had shaved heads and wore light clothing. They walked everywhere barefoot, swam the Eurotas River all year long, slept on reeds, and participated in cult rituals for Artemis or Thea. The boys were grouped into herds, or agoli, and were supervised by older adolescents. Once they reached the age of 12, they entered the second cycle of the Agoge, which aimed to integrate them into the society of citizen soldiers.
Το γεννής ζαφιό του τινός.
Ο πατήρ μου είναι Ήρος.
Αυτή λέει ότι η μητήρη.
The Agoge's second cycle included boys aged 12 to 20. When they reached the age of 20, the young men were dubbed Erinyes and could officially serve as hoplites in the Spartan army. Until the age of 30, Spartan men lived in communal mess halls called Sosgenia. From the age of 22 onward, they were permitted to start a family, but 30 was viewed as a more appropriate age to get married. Spartan men served in the military until they turned 60, when they were designated as elders, or gerontes. However, many were known to continue serving anyway, such as King Archimedes III, who fought in the army until he was killed in battle at the age of 62. All adult male Spartans participated in communal meals called syssitia. The attending Spartans contributed different kinds of food on a monthly basis, in addition to a small sum of money to pay for meat. Each man was entitled to one portion of a meal, with the exception of the kings, who received 2 portions. Syssitia attendance was mandatory for every Spartan fortunate enough to be part of the group. The meals had great political significance. According to Xenophon and Plutarch, the syssitia was designed to foster a sense of equality between citizens. It also demonstrated the self-restraint and moderation of Spartan society. But in reality, the syssitia only increased the differentiation between the rich and the poor. Those who could not afford to contribute to the communal food not only missed their meals, but also lost their right of citizenship.
Your tour has ended. As you have seen, the Agogi was not for the weak or faint of heart, but it did its job in producing skilled warriors and shrewd citizens. What else would you like to do? So you think you are ready for a test? Very well. Let us see how you fare. First, a simple question. The Agogi was made up of how many cycles? I'm afraid that is not correct. Keep trying. Correct. The Agogi was divided into 3 cycles. One for boys aged 7 to 12, one for adolescents aged 12 to 20, and one for men aged 20 to 30. Next question. How many meal portions were kings entitled to at Syssitia? Don't be ridiculous. How can a Spartan king go to war if they cannot even lift themselves from their throne? Try another answer. No, it wasn't wise to deny a Spartan his meal. Keep trying. No, although that was the allotted food for most Spartan citizens. Try again. Yes, Spartan kings had the right to double portions. One final question. When were Spartans allowed to grow mustaches? Yes, once a Spartan man was over 30, he was allowed to adorn his face with a glorious display of manhood. Impressive, visitor. You should be proud. Safe travels, visitor.
Amazing. You have now completed all available guided tours. Congratulations on your achievement and dedication to knowledge. We hope you have enjoyed your explorations into the rich history of ancient Greece. Even though you've done all the tours, there's still plenty left to see. There are hundreds of world stations to explore, mountains to climb, seas to swim, and sunsets to watch. Remember that you're welcome to return to guided tours at any time and replay your favorite ones. On behalf of the Assassin's Creed team, thanks for playing the Discovery Tour, and we hope to see you again soon.
Ελίας,
Ότι δίναν δε γίγνεσθε αξιοπρεπείς.